So, my name is Ram Sagar. I am working at Indian Institute of Astrophysics, Bangalore as a retired scientist, NASI Senior Scientist Platinum Jubilee Fellow. So, today I am going to talk about determination of cluster parameters, namely reddening, distance and age, and after that I will also describe how they have been used to study galactic structure and distribution of interstellar matter in our galaxy. And age determination has been used to test stellar evolutionary models, and in fact it is because of this reason it is also called that star clusters are test bed for stellar evolution model. And towards the end I will highlight what is the major contribution once precise photometry from Hubble Space Telescope has been used to study color magnitude diagram of the cluster. So, let me begin with describing you few basic definition on this aspect. One, quite often we use what is called operant distance modulus. It is defined by this equation, and this derivation is based on the inverse square law and definition of magnitude. So, from this equation it is very clear that we have to correct operant distance modulus for the interstellar extension. It means intrinsic magnitude is equal to operant magnitude minus interstellar extension, and this interstellar extension includes absorption and scattering. So, from this two combination, if you see actual distance we can derive from true distance modulus. So, the difference between operant and true distance modulus is that in case of true distance modulus, effect due to interstellar extension has been taken care. And from this equation we can see that if true distance modulus is 0, 5 and so on, this corresponds to a distance of the object in unit of parsec is equal to 10, 100 and so on. Now, I will explain you little bit because how we are going to use these techniques from the observations whatever is available, and what is available when we observe any star clusters. So, the ideal thing should be to know about distance and reddening of a object or star is to take its spectra, and then that spectra we should compare with the spectra of a star which is very nearby. What I mean by this statement, that nearby star is having no reddening. So, it is like unreddened star, but reddened star will have interstellar absorption effects and these things. And when we compare these two spectra, we can find out what is the attenuation due to interstellar matter. But the limitation in this case is that, as we know, for getting spectra at a very good resolution, we can only observe a very bright object and fainter objects cannot be observed. It is because of this reason, in fact, astronomers long back they devised a method what is popularly known as photometry. It means instead of taking spectra, we measure photons in certain bands, and that is why we reduce the spectroscopic resolution, but advantage is that we can observe much fainter objects, and it is simply because of this large number, in fact more than few tens of photometric pass bands are used in astrophysics depending upon scientific information we would like to derive. And in most of cluster study, in fact, photometry is quite often used and not that much spectroscopy. So, while we study any star cluster, then photometry is mostly used for color magnitude diagram and study stellar evolution, while high resolution, that is more than 30,000, they are used for spectroscopic observation of bright stars, and one can find out their atmospheric properties like what is abundance and so on. So, that is, I mean, both techniques can be used. For star clusters, photometry is mostly used for preparing color magnitude diagram and then study stellar evolution, while high resolution spectroscopic observation of bright stars are used to study atmospheric abundance and parameters like that. In fact, this slide is telling us that how to determine using color diagram and color magnitude diagram, reddening and distance of the star cluster, and these observations were taken with our Indian telescope named 104 centimeter Sampurnanand telescope, and this entire results they are published, which is indicated there. And as you can see, any reddened stars, basically, if it is there and there will be a reddening line, that is the slope at which this star will be displaced if the interstellar extinction law is applied, which I will describe in the next slide. And this reddening line in this diagram, u minus b versus b minus v color diagram, it has a slope of 0.72 and this slope is reflected here. So, as you can see, x axis it tells that what is the color excess, which is a measure of interstellar reddening in color b minus v, while on the y axis projection of this tells us the color excess E u minus v, which is effect of reddening in the color u minus v. And since the matter is attenuating, so all the time the temperature, I mean the color effect is that always it will be reddened. That is why we call it as a reddening effect. To determine distance for a single star, either we know the spectroscopy, then we can from the spectra we can find out what is its spectral type and luminosity class, and from there we can find out what is absolute magnitude, and a comparison of apparent magnitude and absolute magnitude, difference of the two will tell us what is the distance modulus. And if we take care of reddening, as I explained earlier, then we are able to derive true distance modulus of the star cluster. And what is the major advantage is that we have large number of main sequence stars in a star cluster. So, we know exactly what is the location of 0 age main sequence, and fitting of that is very useful, and it provides better determination of cluster distance. And these figures I have taken from the references which are indicated here, and this is color diagram u minus v versus v minus v, and this is v versus b minus v color magnitude diagram. And 0 age main sequence is taken by from Schmidt-Keller's work. Using this technique, we can determine distances and reddening of a large number of galactic clusters, and in fact, that has been done recently. And also using Gaia data cluster members have been determined precisely, and once we determine these distance modulus, we can use that distances to study spiral arms in our galaxy, and it is a very important tool. In this case, generally distances are accurate to about 10%, and that is our limitation. These errors comes from observational error plus whatever uncertainty we have in theoretical models. If it contributes put together, then it amounts about 10%. Similarly, if we trying to find out what is the accuracy of our color excess determination E by minus V. So, it is in terms of magnitude, it is about 0.02 magnitude, and this is with precise photometry. It means photoelectric photometry are charge coupled devices, where we have magnitudes measured with better than 0.01 magnitude. In that case, typical uncertainty in the color excess determination is 0.02 magnitude. And this way, if we are able to determine color excess of many star cluster complexes in star forming region, then those information can be used to study variation of interstellar matter in star forming complex, as well as variation of interstellar matter in the disk of our galaxy, because most of these young star clusters where we have still interstellar matter in the cluster region, they are located along the disk of our galaxy. And in fact, this slide shows the interstellar extinction law. For this, scientists have defined a parameter what we call total to selective absorption, ratio of total absorption to selective, and it is denoted by R. It is a function of wavelength, and it is expressed as R lambda is equal to total extension A lambda divided by color excess in E b minus V. And in order to understand how these things work, we know very well in physics there is a Beer-Lambert's law, which express that whatever if suppose I lambda 0 is the intensity or flux which is originating from a star, it means outside the interstellar matter, and then that flux travels through interstellar matter, then we get I lambda is the value. Then both these numbers, they are related by this expression, and it is derived using Beer-Lambert's law. And this k lambda, which is we call attenuation coefficient, it is a function of wavelength, and x is the interstellar matter which is causing attenuation. It means absorption as well as scattering, and from the very nature of both these absorption and scattering, if x contains a particular type of dust, its chemical composition, then coefficients will be different, and all those things have been studied very well by these two authors, Cordelli et al. In 1989 and Nandi et al. 1981, and they are published by them. I am just here summarizing what is the main result of such a study. So, on the x axis it is a wavelength which is plotted. In fact, it is 1 over lambda, and wavelength is in unit of micron, and ratio of A lambda to total absorption, it is plotted along y axis, and it varies from 0 to 5. So, as you can see, at a very large wavelength almost we have 0 attenuation, but as the wavelength decreases we are moving from visual to near UV, A lambda value of A lambda by AB, it starts increasing, and in UV region while we reach, we find a bump, a feature which is very well known, and it is close to, near about 2175 angstrom bump, and after that again, this bump again it started rising. The important thing to notice, depending upon what is the constituent of these interstellar matter, we may have value of A lambda by E b minus v different for different curve. For example, 3.1, which is considered to be normal, and in most part of the galaxy this is true. But there are also region star forming complexes where it deviates. In some cases it has a value as low as 2.75, in some cases maximum, it increases, and the maximum value which has been observed, it goes up to 5.5. So, this one can see that the property of interstellar matter, it varies, and star cluster are very handy tool to study such type of distribution. In the next few slides, now I am trying to explain you that if we have precise photometry and membership of the stars well established using kinematic properties like proper motion, radial velocity, then we can see that there are certain part of the HR diagram of star clusters which a normal stellar evolution theory is not able to explain. And one such group of stars which are found in globular clusters, they are called blue straggler stars, in brief BSS, and their formation is not well understood, and in fact, our Indian astroset has contributed significantly to the understanding of these type of object. So, next few slide I will try to concentrate on that. So, in this let me just introduce what BSS, blue straggler stars are there. So, this is a color magnitude diagram of a galactic globular cluster M3, and x axis is the color B minus V, y is the apparent V magnitude. So, we can see we have a well defined cluster main sequence, then red giant branch, then horizontal branch, and it has a structure. As per normal stellar evolution theory, we should not expect any star in this part. So, right in the beginning people had doubt, and in fact, this type of objects they were discovered by Sandage as early as 1953. But formation process was not understood, and it took more than couple of decades to really understand them, and UV observation taken with astrosat type of satellite, they have started contributing significantly to their understanding. And these stars are located above the main sequence turn off point, and this location suggests that blue straggler stars are more massive than cluster population, and this is confirmed by a few mass measurement made recently, because some of them are binary. So, the mass has been measured, and if we fit a evolutionary track, then this fits for 1.7 solar mass. So, the main sequence mass is 0.8, for the blue straggler star typical mass is 1.7 solar mass. So, question is how they are still lying on the main sequence. If we understand stellar evolution well, then they should have not be located at this point, they would have moved to the red giant branch. So, in fact, now globular cluster have no evidence of recent star formation. So, question is how this mass transformation has taken place, they are cluster member, what is the origin of them. So, most likely theory which is emerging, it is a mass transfer process between binary companion up to complete coalescence. I mean, there are some people say a star merger, some binary in which mass transfer has taken place, and these scenarios are being used to explain these mass, and UV observations are providing valuable insight in this process in the formation of blue straggler stars. So, being more massive than average cluster star, blue straggler star is skinned towards the cluster center due to dynamical evolution, and in globular clusters because of they are more massive, they are trying to be more concentrated towards center of our cluster. In fact, this cartoon which is prepared by one of our PhD student in IIA, Snehlata Sahu, she has really put the entire problem of blue straggler, that what is the astrophysical questions which we are trying to understand. It is this, that first when they were discovered by Sandes in globular cluster M3, then easiest way was that ground observation in the cluster there, and we said that you are not member of the family, that you are not cluster member, and they start saying no, we are cluster member, and that question was settled once the kinematical motions were observed, and also UV observation in the central region of the HST, that also helped. And in fact, spectroscopic observation of those blue straggler stars also confirmed that they are indeed cluster member. So, all these things they just joined together, that all evidence proved that yes, they are cluster member. Then the what question arose, how they can be so young if they are cluster member, and this was the question. And other question is how they are able to get extra fuel, how if they are member, and for that as I mentioned earlier, and here there are two competing theory. In fact, depending upon if we have open cluster, then most likely it is binarity, where mass transfer seems to be responsible for the progenitor. In case of globular clusters which are very rich, we have merger, collisions, and that also seems to be responsible for the formation of blue straggler stars. And that is the stage which I would try to explain in the next few slides what I mean by these things. So, as I mentioned that it is Annapurni Subramaniam and her PhD students. In fact, this project is led by them, and we can call it ultraviolet route to study blue straggler stars, both in galactic open and globular clusters. And in fact, we have obtained her group in one project. I am also PI. We have observed about 8 open clusters and 6-7 globular clusters she has observed, and we are trying to put together to understand theory. Some of the results I will try to highlight here and mention that how it helps to understand them. So, if you see in this figure, this is a optical color magnitude diagram. V means visual magnitude versus B minus V color. And if you see, this is main sequence, this is the location of blue stragglers, and this is red giant branch, this is horizontal branch, and this is blue horizontal branch, and this is white dwarf location. If you see, keep x axis the same, that is visual magnitude, but color instead of B minus V, if we plot one of the ultraviolet color, then we see immediately, and one of the optical color, that the region extended by blue straggler, it extends quite a bit, by a factor of 3 it gets enlarged. Structure of horizontal branch, it becomes very different, and even the location of horizontal and these things, and all these things are expected because we know that the star's radiation can be considered as a black body temperature radiation. So, in UV, since these stars are emitting more and they are not emitting that much in visual region, and that is the main reason for this, and in fact, this is the main source of information which has been used to understand the progenitors of these blue straggler star. And in fact, this diagram is again shown just for comparison, that as you can see that if we plot on the x axis ultraviolet color, then blue straggler strip, it becomes 3 magnitude on y axis compared to less than magnitude or about magnitude in optical. So, that is why in fact, UV light, UV observations, they are very helpful, because in UV light the sequence become narrow, in vertical it is about 3 magnitude, and that is why these informations are ideal for studying blue straggler stars in the core of the galactic globular clusters. And what she has done in one of the paper, which is recently published in Monthly Note, says she has taken data from UBIT, AstroSat, Hubble Space Telescope and Gaia for cluster globular cluster NGC 288. And the title of the paper is a census of hot stellar population and their properties from UV. So, in the central region, optical information has been taken from HST, proper motion information has been taken from Gaia, and our AstroSat UBIT information for UV and near UV information have been taken from there. This image is taken with UBIT of the cluster. So, as you can see, in UV ultraviolet region, only bright objects emit. So, the crowding disappears. In fact, we are able to resolve, and this is one of the I will say highlight point of UBIT on AstroSat, that it has the highest resolving power so far in compared to other space. In fact, the nearest is Galax, which has about 4 arc second, and this has about 1 arc second. So, that advantage has been utilized in studying these clusters, and they have been able to study radial variation of blue stragglers and up to a radius of 10 arc minute, and this became possible by combining information from UBIT and HST, and it was found that bright blue straggler stars are more centrally located, and then they have been able to conjecture how their property changes with radius and what are the possible scenario for the formation of blue straggler star in this cluster. Another example which they have published in the reference, Tandon et al. 2017 and Subramaniam et al. 2016. In fact, they have identified a very interesting blue straggler star, which has temperature 6000 degree Kelvin, and it is a post asymptotic giant branch, which has a temperature 17,000. So, it is a binary combination which is responsible for the blue straggler location, and it is not a sub dwarf. In fact, far UV band shows that the flux is writing at least until 1481 angstrom, and this is first such blue straggler identified in an open cluster, and it is very useful, and it's an it supports that blue straggler formation in this object is via mass transfer. And what is the main advantage of ultraviolet? It has number of filters much larger than in any other space probe at such wavelength. So, as we can see, we have filled those gaps which were not possible otherwise with these UV observation, and other galaxy and observations taken from other near IR and optical region, they are taken from the published archive, and we can see we can fit beautiful spectral energy distribution. And if this multi wavelength data from U bit would have been absent, then it would have been difficult to constrain the temperature of this asymptotic giant or horizontal branch star. So, this is the advantage of, I will say, U bit. So, now I am going to tell you about determination of age of the star clusters, and in this case how observations are compared with theoretical models, and how a combination of the two is used to determine age of the cluster. Actually, it is well known, for example, in this diagram, this is also we can say HR diagram, and this is the 0 age main sequence. So, once star arrives on the main sequence, hydrogen burning stars, it practically stays there as long as its hydrogen fuel exhaust, and when hydrogen burning starts moving from core to cell, that is when it moves. So, it means when hydrogen burning started until end of the fuel, it stays as the point. So, that is why in star cluster there where this thing happen in this diagram, which is a based on theoretical model generated by Meaders group from Geneva. So, you see the asterisk, these are the turn off point. It means we know exactly from, well, exactly means based on stellar model, that how much time it takes to reach this point and move beyond, that is the stage where hydrogen burning in the core exhaust and it starts moving to the cell region. And as you can say, it depends upon mass of the main sequence star. For example, for it is a 60 million year for 56 solar mass. It increases as the mass decreases. For 4 masses it has been shown, they are in the range of 6 to 60 solar mass, and they spend just 3 to 50 million years on the main sequence, which is given here. They are indicated. So, in fact, only in a sense we can say with some accuracy using models, if we are able to locate this turn off point in the cluster diagram, then we can find out. Also, using these individual star models, one can generate what we called isochrones, means stars of equal age, but they are located in different stellar evolutionary phase, and it is because of this reason star clusters are called test bed for stellar evolution, because all the cluster members they are formed almost at the same time. So, while we use various stellar models for different masses, then we generate isochrones for different ages, which are indicated here, and they are denoted as isochrones. And these isochrones, in fact, they are then fitted to the intrinsic color magnitude diagram of the cluster, which is equivalent to this, and we can determine age, and that is what is shown in this diagram. And here this diagram has been taken from the work of Sanday's group, and as you can see, on y axis it is the absolute magnitude, on x axis it is color blue to red, and it is indicative of temperature. And if we see on this axis, it is age of the main sequence star determined from turn off point. So, for example, this is the arrow indicate location of sun. It means it's a as we know, the age of the sun is about 4.5 gigayear. This is younger than that, M67, and this is a globular cluster. And then the various isochrones which are displayed here. So, we have for example, in case of NGC 2362, most of the star they are still lying on the main sequence, but in other cluster these main sequence stars, which are massive than the turn off point, they have moved to this phase, because in these cases their lifetime is less, hydrogen burning in the center has exhausted. So, that is why they have moved to the giant, red giant and supergiant phases of stellar evolution, and these phases depend upon the mass of the star. So, in fact, this diagram is very useful to understand a stellar evolutionary model, and many different type of models have been tested. In fact, such precise photometry and their comparison of the shape of the sequences, they have even proven observationally that the older model, where there was no convection considered in the core, it is no more valid. In fact, it is proven that convective core are possible, and they in fact increase age of the cluster in comparison to the models where core convection in the core is not considered. And this is the formula which we can derive empirically, that is T age in years is equal to expression which is given by here. It is a function of mass and luminosity, and also this F is the fraction, and this is the metallicity X, hydrogen fraction which is there. In this process, we can say that accuracy of the age determination is typically about 20-25%. It is not more than that, but it has been very useful to find out ages of the various cluster, and then study what is the disruption time of, let us say, galactic open cluster. And such a study have demonstrated that galactic open clusters dynamical lifetime is about 10 to the power 8 years, and a large fraction of them they dissolve and disrupt, and they form filled star in the galaxy. Those which are having like M67 and other open clusters which are compact, they have total mass is more than that, they survive this type of things, and they are still present for us as a laboratory to study the late stages of stellar evolution. In the next few slides, I will just try to highlight what HST Hubble Space Telescope observations have taught in this aspect. In fact, 20 years ago we believed that all the stars in a galactic clusters they are formed at the same time, but precise observations taken with HST Hubble Space Telescope, they demonstrated very clearly that that is not the case. And this is one such cluster named the NGC 1866, it is located in Magellanic Cloud, and you can see that there are multiple population, and in fact, these are the two various isochrones with various parameters which are shown here. They are fitted, and this work has been published by Milon et al. 2017 in Monthly Notices, volume 465, and it clearly establishes and demonstrates that there have been multiple epochs of star formation, and the two epochs which are distinctly different, they have several giga-year difference, and that is a very important result recently derived based on the precise photometry of HST. This is its magnified version, just to explain the same with various color, as you can see here and here, and in fact, for various magnitude being and various color ranges, and it is taken from the same paper, and it also shows that even binary fractions which are present in these clusters, they are visible. So, in fact, this way HST has really provided us very valuable information about epochs of star formation in such massive stars, which we earlier thought it's that are coeval. That is why our one understanding that all stars form together, that has changed. Based on study of galactic open cluster, we felt that maybe only few giga-year may be time spread, but these studies have clearly demonstrated that these epochs could be separated as far as something like few giga-year. So, if I would like to conclude whatever I talked about, then I can say that the precise photometry, spectroscopic and kinematics information taken with telescopes like Hubble Space Telescope or high resolution spectra taken from ground based observation, and precise kinematic information taken from Gaia, all these indicate following interesting results. High resolution spectroscopic measurements indicates different chemical composition in the same cluster. In the same globular cluster, it is found that they have different chemical composition. Accurate photometry with Hubble Space Telescope reveals splitting of the evolutionary sequence. It means there are multiple stellar population which are present. It is not a single epoch star formation. Gaia data indicates that the kinematical difference in the different stellar population. In these multiple population, if you see their kinematic property, they differ. So, all these above scenario pose a challenge to the present understanding of star formation theory, which was considered that it was single epoch, and in fact, that is one of the front line area in star formation, which people are trying to understand, that how these multiple epochs are formed and what are the processes and what are the consequences of such. Thank you. That's all.